The influence action. We are going to break down the major problems presented for Dungeon Masters specifically by the new form of this rule. So first, this video has nothing to do with Great Weapon Master or Rogue Sneak Attack or any other alleged One D&D nerfs, because everybody used to complain about those things being overpowered, so of course they've been taken down a notch. And second, this video is not an invitation for anyone to demonize all of One D&D in the comments. Personally, I really like or am just indifferent to basically every other rule and feature that has come out of these first two playtest documents. But this one little thing that did already kind of exist, it has troublesome new language, and very importantly, it has a new placement, no longer in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but moved into this upcoming 2024 Player's Handbook. And it just has inarguably adverse effects when combined with the new natural 20s always succeed potential rule. I really expect that if this one rule does not change, it will be responsible for a lot of completely unnecessary arguments from players directed at Dungeon Masters when they're just trying to run a fun game. And look, I don't get worked up over game mechanics. At first, I really didn't like the idea of DMs not being able to crit when they roll a natural 20. Something I'm not sure about is critical hits just for player characters. If I'm the DM and I roll a natural 20, I want to be able to crit too. And I still don't love it, but then I actually playtested it with level 1 characters and it totally saved them. So let's keep an open mind and remember this influence action is just another piece of playtest material, but it is in the playtest, so designers may tweak how it works, but it's really unlikely that they would entirely cut it out of the new player's handbook, and we are going to have to deal with this rule in one form or another. So this video is not about getting riled up over one weird rule in a game. It's about understanding how it might play out so we can make our own adjustments to keep our games moving and our players happy when eventually one of them brings up this weird rule and it threatens to spoil a session. Because I'm Bob, this is where we learn how to have more fun playing D&D together, and after all, you're probably the Dungeon Master if you're watching this sort of video, so of course, you are in charge of what happens at your table. It may only be a few square feet or a virtual tabletop, but it's your land, and you rule over it. And at last, you can truly claim the title you deserve with our new regal sponsor, Established Titles. That's right, they grant you traditional lordship in Scotland with an official proclamation and your own uniquely numbered plot of Scottish land as small as 1 square foot. And they work with global charities to plant a tree for every order. And yeah, this is not my name because Grace and I decided to give this title to our heir, Lady Squeaks Caddington III. But humans can include their title on things like credit cards, plane tickets, and even dating profiles. So become a lord, lady, or laird yourself, or give the title to someone through Established Titles. Link below and use code BOBWORLDBUILDER to save 10%. Plus, the first 200 lairds to use that code will be our new neighbors in Scotland. Titled or not, here's the rules for social interaction from the 5e Dungeon Master's Guide. During a social interaction, the adventurers usually have a goal. They want to extract information, secure aid, win someone's trust, escape punishment, avoid combat, negotiate a treaty, or achieve whatever other objective led to the interaction in the first place. The creatures they interact with also have agendas. Remember that last point. NPCs have agendas too. It's going to come up later. Some DMs prefer to run a social interaction as a free-form role-playing exercise, where dice rarely come into play. Other DMs prefer to resolve the outcome of an interaction by having characters make charisma checks. Either approach works, and most games fall somewhere in between, balancing player skill, role-playing and persuading, with character skill, reflected by ability checks. And this preface is fundamental to the social pillar of the game, because it spells out that the DM decides how much or how little dice rolls can determine the outcome of a social interaction between PCs and NPCs. Then, it continues with a relatively simple 3-step process for us to use a mixture of actual roleplay and dice rolls. 1. Choose the starting attitude of a creature the adventurers are interacting with: friendly, indifferent, or hostile. It includes definitions for each attitude, but the important parts are that friendly means they want to help the party, and hostile means they want to hinder the party. 2. Play out the conversation. Let the adventurers make their points, trying to frame their statements in terms that are meaningful to the creature they are interacting with. Continuing, Whether the adventurers can shift a creature's attitude is up to you. You decide whether the adventurers have successfully couched their statements in terms that matter to the creature. Again, laying out that the DM decides what an NPC will or will not do for the party. But then, it gets a little tricky with this next part. 3. When the adventurers get to the point of their request, demand, or suggestion, or if you decide the conversation has run its course, call for a charisma check. Any character who has actively participated in the conversation can make the check. Depending on how the adventurers handled the conversation, the persuasion, deception, or intimidation skill might apply to the check. The creature's current attitude determines the DC required to achieve a specific reaction, as shown in the conversation reaction table. Yeah, here's where even this 5e version gets a little too prescriptive for my taste. But to be fair, the friendly creature's reactions seem perfectly reasonable to me, ranging from a default of doing as they are asked to a DC 20 accepting a significant risk or sacrifice to do as they are asked. But the indifferent creature accepting even a minor risk on a DC 20 starts to push it for me, and then a quote, hostile creature has only a DC 10 to achieve the same status as the default for indifferent creatures, and at DC 20, the supposedly hostile creature will do the party a favor as long as no risk is involved. Maybe it's just the language being used, but I don't think any creature with a hostile attitude should help the party whatsoever. And when your level 3 bard probably has +7 to their persuasion, it's not very difficult to have even these hostile creatures just working for the party. Still, these are the rules in the DMG. They're clearly directed at beginner DMs who would benefit from having a framework and some structure around which to become comfortable with the role-playing social pillar that makes D&D awesome and different from the video games and board games that the new DM may be familiar with. Therefore, the questionable parts of this 5e version are saved by the fact that these rules are for the DM only to read, and they explicitly tell the DM it's up to them whether or not to use these attitudes and creature reaction DCs. However, the way these same attitudes and DCs are currently laid out in the latest playtest document for One D&D almost entirely takes away that control from the DM and gives it to the player. Not sharing it, but taking it and moving it. Remember, this playtest material is for the 2024 PHB, so this is all speaking to players. Pay attention to the language in these sections. With the influence action, you can try to influence another creature to do something you request or demand. This action can be used only on creatures controlled by the DM, and it isn't mind control. It can't force a creature to do something that is counter to the creature's alignment or that is otherwise repugnant to the creature. First, this action can only be used by PCs against the DM. It can't be used by the DM against PCs or player versus player. And okay, we don't want PvP, we don't want the DM taking away agencies from the players, so that's good. But hopefully, you can already see that out of the gate, this rule is expressing that the DM has less agency in social interactions than the players do. It is literally setting up a new DM to be taken advantage of. And I don't like it. Now, it does say that this isn't mind control, and I value how it specifies that an NPC won't do anything they find repugnant. But again, hopefully you can see that certain players, and I'm not saying your players, but absolutely there are players who exist that will argue with the DM as to what an NPC should or should not find repugnant. This preface is walking a knife's edge through problematic player behavior territory, just assuming all players will act with respect and integrity 100% of the time. Hopefully that's true for your group, but obviously it is not true for everyone. Remember, this game is marketed to 12-year-olds, and frankly, I've read more than enough wild YouTube comments to know that a non-negligible amount of adult D&D players behave publicly with less respect than the average 12-year-old. But let's move on. The One D&D influence action redefines the 3 NPC attitudes, indifferent, friendly, and hostile, including one single line of saving grace for the DM. The DM might determine that the hostile creature is so ill-disposed toward the characters that no charisma check can sway it, in which case the first check fails automatically and no further influence attempts can be made on the creature unless its attitude shifts. This is good because it somewhat restores the DM's agency so that at least a hostile creature may not be swayed by just any charisma check. But what's that you say? If you roll a 20 on the D20 test automatically succeeds? No, Barty McFly, the Laird will not just give you half of their land for defeating those bandits. Well, I'd like to try to persuade him anyway. Yeah, since you keep calling him a lard, he definitely has a hostile attitude at this point. Well, I do still have that inspiration. And one of them crit. Give me that land, Lord. What? I didn't say you could roll. Unless each player in the group already has a solid understanding of how social interaction in D&D should flow, the influence action as currently written will be a source of conflict, making it particularly problematic for the exact same beginner DMs and players the designers are trying to help. And think about it. I bet you the whole reason this is even being shifted from the DMG into the player's handbook is that they're trying to make room in that book for other tips and tricks for new DMs.
One of my focuses, specifically, is the Dungeon Master's Guide. I'm going to make some structural changes to make it more friendly to new DMs.
I wish I could enjoy that irony, but I'm not. I'm worried about the next generation of DMs and players just bickering at each other over the definition of repugnant and then abandoning the game. So if this rule is going to stay in the player's handbook, we're definitely going to need some guidelines for session zeros, probably RPG safety tools, and a firmly worded rule 0 pointing out that the DM's word supersedes the book. Again, new DMs should not be taken advantage of over these rules. And on top of all this, what if, imagine this wild scenario. What if the player characters are trying to convince an NPC of something that is not true? PCs lying to NPCs makes up a lot of D&D social interactions in my experience, and some NPCs and monsters have solid bonuses to their insight skills that have no effect as written on those DCs. So it's just as easy for player characters to deceive a commoner as a mind flayer, or a dragon, or a devil, and that's not right, so you should definitely be adding those skill modifiers to the DCs. And if you're actually using this, I would see if the players are comfortable letting those DCs apply to their own character. So monsters with high persuasion or deception skills actually get to use them for something. Because as currently written, it doesn't matter for any monster to be good at those skills. And check this out. As someone who tried using the rule verbatim, it only looks good in comparison to no rules at all. It's really not a substantial base for a social interaction system and encourages very simplistic dice-forward behavior and punishes non-charisma players from participating. That's from someone who apparently playtested this rule, and of course, since the mechanic itself relies wholly on charisma checks, and the PCs who roll for it are ones that lead the conversation, then PCs who have low charisma scores are dissuaded from even joining in these conversations, literally dissuading those players from role-playing during the role-playing game, which I think is bad. But remember, pretty much everything else about One D&D seems just fine. So check out this video about the best new rule in One D&D, and remember tomorrow, October 20th, fill out that survey with your own opinions. Thanks for your support, and keep building. Wow.